Hi everybody. We're having a mini lecture today out of class that I'm asking you to watch to save us some time so we can talk about pathos more together as a group. So let's go ahead and get started. I introduced you to the concept of pathos in our first or second class when we were talking about the elements of persuasion. Pathos is any quality or experience that arouses emotions. And we talked about these at the beginning of class, more so in terms of the three elements that make up the rhetorical proofs. The elements of persuasion, those include pathos, but also include logos and ethos. And we're going to be talking about those two as the semester progresses. But today we're focusing our lecture and our study on pathos alone. So Aristotle was the guy who came up with a lot of this idea about rhetoric that you hear me talk so much about. And he had some ideas, some strict ideas about pathos. Primarily, he distinguished emotions from values, such as justice and goodness. So think about as we talk about some of these examples today and in class when we get back together, as we will be trying to think about these in terms of emotion versus value, so that's distinction, because sometimes those blur the lines and they can be a little bit difficult to differentiate. A lot of times emotions will stir up certain types of values in us as well, to draw on those. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. Aristotle said that, and also to understand how emotions are aroused or quelled, a reader or someone who's sending a message must understand the state of mind of people who are angry, joyful, or indignant. They must know how to excite those emotions in people. So that's why we talk so much about audience and why that is so important, what the audience wants, needs, our primary audience, our secondary audience. And if we can successfully arouse emotion in those audience members, we have the chance of being more persuasive. But one thing too I want you to consider too is for our rhetorical situations, we are writing first and foremost for academic audiences. So the use of pathos or emotion is different, and a little more quelled than it is in some of other rhetorical situations, especially in advertisements, which we'll be looking at a lot of those for our study of pathos, because I think that's a really good jumping off point to get us thinking about different types of emotions and how they are aroused in us by a particular communicator. But also he said that we have to understand the reasons for which people become emotional. And again, that goes back to anticipating the needs of our audience and how we might be able to use pathos in order to get them to come over more to our side of thinking. All right, so use of pathos. Big question a lot of times when we use pathos is it negative or is it unethical? Well, you have to think about that yourself, and we have to weigh that individually, because ultimately the audience decides on whether or not use of pathos is ethical or unethical. It's very subjective. So what appears as what's appealing to me may not be appealing to you. What is offensive to me may not be offensive to you. So we have to think about that, and we have to also think about the audience's needs. That's why we talk so much about the rhetorical situation. So what I'd like you to do is watch the ad that's listed here at the bottom of the screen. I put these in Moodle as well, so if you can't do the direct link from this lecture, you can go into Moodle, and under the lecture it will say this is this ad. This is the SPCA ad. So what I'd like you to do is pause this lecture for just a moment and go into Moodle, launch this ad, watch it. And I want you to think about, how do you feel about highly emotional advertisements or other arguments? Do you trust the speaker? Think about perhaps a time you've been at home watching television and an ad comes on and there's a speaker that says, for the price of a cup of coffee, you can feed little Maria for a week, right? Do you think that ad is effective? Do you run to the telephone with your credit card in hand, ready to donate to that particular organization? Or do you have a different reaction to it? Some people feel that highly emotional appeals can be can come across as being manipulative, and they tend to then backfire on the people who are putting those messages together. So this is one of those examples. So pause this lecture, take just a moment, come back to it, and we will resume with some questions about this particular ad. Okay, so now that you've watched the ad, my first question is what is your initial reaction to it? This is the SPCA ad. So I'd like you to take just a second and jot down a few ideas on a scratched piece of paper, something that you'll remember to bring to class with you, about your initial reaction to it. Perhaps you've seen this ad before, so it may not be something new, so you may have had some time to develop some other opinions about it, but I want to know what those are. And what specific emotions do you think it attempts to evoke? And then what emotions do you think it actually is evoking in you? Because again, reaction is subjective. So take a second to respond to those questions. You can pause this lecture and make a few notes. All right, so moving along. In his work Rhetoric, Aristotle said that there were emotions that were most common in public life, and this is during his time. Now, these aren't certainly the only emotions in the database of emotions, but these are the ones that he identified, and those include anger, mildness, love or friendship, enmity or hatred, fear, confidence, shame, shamelessness, benevolence, its favor or gratitude, pity, indignation, envy, emulation, and contempt. So what I would like you to do is we're going to be, I've got some other mini assignment for you. I want you to keep these particular emotions in mind as you watch and study these particular examples that I'm going to share with you in just a second. So if you want to jot these down or have it so you can come back to these without having to replay the whole lecture, feel free to write them down or type them up in a place where you can get to them. All right, so what I would like you to do for our next class is to actually follow the links below and watch and study these ads. There are 3 for you. And what I've also done is I've listed, or I've put links to these in Moodle as well. So if you're not able to get to these directly from the lecture, you can stop the lecture and go into Moodle and launch these. But so after you watch the ads, take some notes as you're thinking about it. But on the next slide, there's a mini assignment for you, some questions I want you to be thinking about as you watch the ads that we can discuss later in class. So if you forward to the next slide, you'll see your mini assignment. What emotions from Aristotle's list, those ones that are on a couple slides ago, do you think these ads evoke? Make a brief list for each and bring it to our next class. Be prepared to share your ideas with the class. You might also think about your reaction to those ads as well, because we're going to talk about the different types of reactions and how reactions are subjective depending on the audience and what our audience needs and wants, and who might that audience be. So this concludes our mini lecture on pathos. I look forward to seeing you in class to talk about the assignments that we've had for today.